Hi, everyone. I'm Meredith Walters. I'm the Director of Arts and Culture at Brooklyn Public Library, and thank you for joining us tonight for a really lively conversation, pre-recorded conversation between Brent Michael Davids and Dr. Jessica Bassett Pereira. Um, and this conversation is part of our Lenape Hoking exhibition that's up at our Greenpoint Library. We've been having a series of really terrific, mostly Zoom conversations over the past few months. We have this conversation today, and I'm happy to report that on Sunday, April 10th, we'll have a portrait concert of works by Brent Michael Davids that is by the Dream Unfinished Orchestra. They'll be with us to perform his works. I'll quickly let you know that Brent Michael Davids is a highly acclaimed composer and a film composer as well. He's co-director of the Lenape Center in New York City and an American Indian citizen of the Stockbridge Munsee Band of the Mohican Nation. As an American Indian music specialist, Davids is in demand as an educator and a consultant for films, television, schools, festivals, seminars, and workshops. He is a master performer of American Indian instruments and styles and a designer of original music instruments, including traditional Native American instruments that he reconceives and reinvents, including a soprano quartz flute and a bass quartz flute, and a dozen other percussion devices that chirp or whistle. I am so excited to introduce Brent Michael Davids to you now. He'll say a quick welcome. We'll see the video and then he'll come back for a Q&A afterward. Brent?
Hi, hello. Welcome to everyone. I'd like to just welcome you all as a Lenape person, a Munsee, Lenape, and a Mohican. Welcome you to Lenape Hoking. If you're in New York City, welcome. If you're, streaming in and watching this video, welcome to Lenape Hoking as well. Lenape people have been welcoming others, visitors to this continent for thousands of years, and so everyone welcome. As my old funny friend Sammy Tonkai used to say, even you. So welcome.
Thanks so much. And now my colleague will start the video. It'll be a little over 48 minutes long, then we'll come back live.
So we wanted to frame today's conversation with Brent Michael Davids around selections of musical works that are significant to him and his trajectory into becoming a world-renowned composer who also happens to be Native American. And we will end, this is all leading into the newly composed song, Lenape Hoking, an anthem for the Lenape Center and its related music video, which is all part of this exhibit. So I want to say thank you for being here today, Brent Michael Davids, and I'd just like to turn it over to you to introduce the first song and get the conversation going. So thank you.
Yes, hi. Thanks. First, I want to say that I'm wearing a Joe Baker original design right now. This is his beadwork. This is a traditional Lenape collar, and you won't see this in the exhibit, but you can see it right now. I'm caretaking this for Joe, and I guess I'd like to start out by saying I got interested in music by going to an incredibly big high school. I was born in Wisconsin. I'm from here, but my parents, my dad especially, moved us to Chicago area, Chicagoland, because he wanted us to get a better education. So that's how that prompted all of this. So I went to a high school that was 4,000 students.
Wow.
And it had like 1,000 people in my graduating class. And we had, it was like college. We had electives in high school, so we could choose what we wanted to do. And so I chose, music theory as something I was taking
in my junior year. So I started studying in my junior year music theory, which is, first year theory is like studying how to put chords together and chord progressions and basically learning to write like Mozart. So it's 18th century counterpoint. But I took to it like a fish to water. It was so enriching to me to get into that, to understand how music, has been written and put down on paper. So I started to compose that year too. And one thing the band director used to do, I was playing brass instruments all through junior high and high school. He used to come in the middle of the day during lunch hours, and he'd put new records on the LP in the band room speakers, so we could hear, just whoever's in there eating lunch or whatever, we could hear something new. And he came in one time and he put on this Black Angels by George Crumb LP, and this one section, Night of the Electric Insects. It was just amazing to me what that sound was. And normally in music, like you might have a piece that's titled one thing or another, like Sunset or, Driving Along the Highway. And the music may or may not sound like what that is. But this actually sounded like a Night of Electric Insects. And I was just really fascinated by the newness of it and the effects. And that instantly got me started writing music myself. I wrote my first two pieces in 1976, 1977. So that's like 45 years ago. And I've been going ever since. So that's what this is too. And I should say too that I think it's 1973, David Harrington of the Kronos Quartet, the string quartet, he also heard this exact same recording, the 1971 version, and he founded the Kronos Quartet after hearing this work. And they went on to perform the work themselves. And I also went on to compose for the Kronos Quartet, which we'll hear in a little bit.
Oh, great. Well, let's hear a little bit of the George Crumb's Black Angels. I agree with you that George Crumb had an amazing ability to do that, and the musicians who carried it off. It's impressive. Could you tell us more about the piece, the collaboration with Kronos?
Yes. David Harrington's mother, Hazel, was living nearby where I was in Arizona. I was going to Arizona State University. She lived in the next city over from where I lived. And she found a news clipping that had been written in the paper about me. And it mentioned something like, don't expect to hear the howling coyotes or the cries of eagles in the music of Brent Michael Davids. His music is more suited to a Kronos Quartet crowd. And she clipped that out and sent it to her son. And then the next time he was visiting her, he came over and we spent an afternoon talking about music. And by the end of that afternoon, he had commissioned me for a new work for the Kronos Quartet. And this is the work called The Singing Woods. Now, it's got a dual meaning. There's an Apache violin that's made out of wood. It's an agave stalk or century plants, they're also called. They live, 10 or 15 years, and then they grow this giant stalk in the middle, right up the center of the thing. They grow really high in the air and then they flower and then the whole plant dies. So Chesley Gosi and Wilson is an Apache medicine man and a violin maker and a flute maker. And he goes out and harvests the stalks, and empties them out and builds these single string Apache violins. They're very tiny things. And the Kronos Quartet used one for the Singing Woods. Now, the Singing Woods refers to the woods, like a forest. It also refers to the instruments of the quartet, 2 violins, a viola, and a cello, and also refers to the Apache violin. So it's got that multi-meaning. And it's also like my takeoff on like Vivaldi. So I did like the 4 seasons. So the first one is the fall, and it's I designed special bows and bells and shakers for the quartet to use when they're performing. So in this first fall, you hear a spinning instrument that I created, I call bird roars. This little flute on the end of a cord, and you spin it around in the air and it chirps like birds. And also I created little shakers, little rawhide shakers that you can put over your finger on your bow hand. So when you're playing your violin or your cello, you can shake the shaker as you're playing and create rhythms. So you hear those 2 things in the first movement, and also, a little melody from the Apache violin.
So, in moving from fall to winter, what do you want to point out for our listeners with the winter piece?
Well, for the winter movement, I noticed that, being here in the woods, that when it snows, the sound quality changes. It's almost like if you're walking into a room that's all padded, or a room that's foamed, for audio recording, it's very dead. There's no reverb. Like when you speak, there's no sonar. Like it doesn't bounce off the wall and come back to you. You don't feel how wide the room is from the sound. It's a very dead space to be in. But snow has this effect in winter too. It lands around everywhere, and it kind of dampens the sound in the forest. And then you hear other sounds. You can hear the sounds of the trees creaking. They're kind of moving, and they creak and snap. And so I wanted to get that feeling into this movement. And also, so I changed. I had special bows made where the horsehair on the bows that they're using was replaced with other materials. So there's leather bows and silk bows and velvet bows. And when they're played across the strings, they create this different kind of sound that you're, in winter. And that's what this movement was about, just trying to capture that feeling of being in winter.
Moving into spring, what changes in the spring excerpt?
In spring, there's kind of a feeling of rain, like spring rains come, and so the bows are replaced with these little rods, I guess. It'd be almost the same as tapping on the back of your bow. There's a technique that string players use that way too, but I actually made just bows that are only sticks. So you can have really good free tapping and you're not ruining your bow either. It's like you can use a separate instrument. So this is, again, features the Apache violin, but also it's a really complicated, I've got multi-layers of these different sixes against sevens, complicated rhythmic scheme of rain. So sometimes you can hear like rain droplets, and sometimes you hear like the wind blows and you get a smattering of raindrops. And then in the middle of it, you hear the Apache violin again.
And then spring into summer. Tell us about summer.
Yeah, for summer, there's a lot of traditions in the summer of powwows and big dance festivals where people are dancing. And a lot of the dancers wear bells, ankle bells on their feet when they're dancing. So you get this jingling sound along with the songs and the music that is happening at dance festivals all around the country. And it's a very much of a summer thing. So what I wanted to do was capture the feeling and the energy of a summer, the hot sun, a lot of dancing. So like the shakers that I had for the bow hand shakers, I put bells, like a single dance bell on the shaker. So when they're playing, actually, they can make dance bell sounds when they're playing and capture that feeling as well. So this was the final movement, Summer, for the Singing Woods.
And from George Crumb to Singing Woods to some of your later works, I wanted to bring back a quote that I love of yours from a 2019 essay where you explain the difference between European and indigenous languages. And this is something that I think linguists might know, but might be new to our audience in terms of thinking about how language for European languages tends to be representative. And you said that in the West, language is a means of representing something real, but for native languages, words create reality. They spawn it. They are considered generative. Indigenous languages are known to give rise to what is really real. And what I love about that idea of language and voice is what I've been thinking about as I've been listening to your choral works and the pieces you've selected today. So just the significance of native voices or native languages in a classical music context is just really incredibly significant to me. So I'd love to hear you talk about your piece Uncovered Wagon.
Yes, Uncovered Wagon was commissioned by Chanticleer, the male chorus in the Bay Area. And it's actually, I got the idea from the old movie, The Covered Wagon. I think it's like an old John Ford movie where a family of settlers is traveling by wagon train into the Platte River Valley area. And they're all worried about being attacked by Indians and etc. So I wanted to uncover a separate view. So I called it the Uncovered Wagon. And creating a different way of looking at America, because the stereotype is that America was free for the taking. No one was here of significance anyway. It's a bunch of primitives, and we are coming to take this land, take the resources, live here ourselves. And that it was like there was no one else here. Like they regarded this country as free and empty, like it was empty spaces. So I wanted to write something that showed, no, it wasn't empty at all. It was really well known, like familiar footpaths. Generations after generations of Native people regarded this as home. And so I did that in a couple of ways. One, in a positive way, like in the second movement, there's 3 different or 4 different Native singing styles that are overlayered over the top of each other. Which was a tricky thing to compose, so you don't lose track of each song. Like it, sometimes you can put music together in a jumble, and then you can't make sense of what's going on there. But I tried to keep it so that you could actually follow all the different songs if you really listen to, and not lose track of them. But before that, I also wanted to depict more of the genocidal part of the taking over of this territory. So I took this racist hymn, Faith of Our Fathers, which is really well known. If you know, the second and third verses are worse than the first one. Like you might be familiar with the first verse, but when you start singing more of it, you realize that it's really taking over the entire nation and killing everybody and taking over their land, and that sort of thing is embedded in that hymn. So what I did is I took the hymn and had it sung by a quartet, like you would hear in church, but had it sung 1/2 step apart in tone from the rest of the music that's going on in the background. So it gives you this kind of eerie, dissonant effect when you hear the song, and it helps present the hymn in a way that you're maybe not used to hearing it, and think twice about it. So that's the first clip anyway, is the hymnal section of Faith of Our Fathers clip from Uncovered Wagon.
Great, let's listen. And then the next clip for Uncovered Wagon, what would you like us to listen for here?
Yeah, this is the ending, and it's got this is where all the other indigenous voices come together. So there's like a northern style singing song in here, northeastern style song, a very rhythmic song, and then also almost like a plains style song that comes in as well. So you got the mix of all these three different styles of native singing coming together in this I would say medley, collage, I guess, more like a collage, but so you can keep the separate pieces focused in your mind.
Mhm. I think what's so extraordinary about this particular piece is the density of the voices, right? That they're not a collage is one way, and density, I guess, is the way that I think of it. That because of this stereotype that what is now known as the U.S. was just terra nullius, free for the taking, when in actuality it's a density of voices, a density of sounds, a density of presence. And I think that's what I love so much about what you did with Black Hills Olawan, in terms of again juxtaposing different kinds of performances on the same stage. So, would you like to tell us a bit about this orchestral piece?
Yes. Yeah, this was commissioned by South Dakota Symphony Orchestra, and I wrote it for the orchestra and the Porcupine Singers. That's the Lakota drum group, singing group, that's right around the same area in South Dakota. And they're Lakota, and they sing traditional songs. So what we did was I went and worked with them a while, and we figured out that there's this. We figured out a way to put the Lakota singers, the Porcupine Singers, into the orchestra work in a way that's not simply a collage. So, an easy way to do this would be, and this happens very commonly, especially in videos and documentaries, happens all the time. You might have like a singing group that's singing, and then have other music underneath, and they're layered over each other, but there's no synchronization. Like you just layer one thing in over something else, and you just accept how it all comes together. That's the way you accept it, play it as it lays sort of way. But what I wanted to do was to be more developed about it and be more integrated, so I could control how the music is interacting, the orchestra and the singers. So I took this song, and we split it apart into different pieces, and I composed it actually into the work. So I wrote the song, the notes for the song down, and used it in a transformative way in the orchestra. Like in an orchestra development, you might have, you know, I am Brent Michael Davids would be like a sentence, right? I just said, I am Brent Michael Davids. For music, what we call development is taking a sentence like that and splitting it up into parts where it becomes more musical. So it would be like, if I were taking that and developing it, it would be like, I, I, I am, I am Brent. I am Brent. I am Brent. Michael, I am Brent Michael Davids. I am Brent Michael Davids. So when you get to the end, you hear this development, it's all broken apart and repeated, and you get a longer, full composition out of something that were small bits in the beginning. So we took the Lakota song and the singers and split it up into little pieces. And then I developed it the same way I would with all the orchestra. So the singing group became another section of the orchestra, like the woodwinds or the percussion section or the string section. And then you had the porcupine singers section. And they would be conducted by the orchestra, and they would come in with little pieces that fit with the orchestra in very specific ways. And at the end, the orchestra we turned the tables where the drum group was leading and the orchestra was following along the drum group to this big, rousing conclusion.
I want to start by saying I love what you said about sound design in terms of thinking about the many ways that media and films and TV and sound design in those spaces tends to fuel misunderstandings or misrepresentations of Native peoples, where sounds that are not our own are mapped on top of us. And what I love about this film score that you selected next is not only that it's a film about the devastation that the Kinswood Dam did, which of course has also been sung about by Buffy Sainte-Marie in popular music contexts. But this idea of also you performing, so you as a performer, that you also play flute and many other instruments, right? But that you are in this score yourself as a composer and a performer. So I just love to hear what you have to say about this score process.
Yeah, they Native music historically, at least with films, were stereotyped so badly that you get that, like the famous Charlie Hill joke. He's like, "Hey, how are you? Hey, how are you?" It's that stereotype, and you get music themes that everyone's familiar with, and they think, oh, that's Indian music, dun dun da da dun da. So we have those stereotypes we're fighting against, and I've always said that for Native people, the music that we create in our own worlds, in our societies, in our cultures, is so much richer than the stereotypical view of that you see in Hollywood. So if composers and filmmakers would actually go to the actual Native people for scores and scoring, the music they would get would be so much better, be so much richer than the stereotypes of what people imagine Native people the real Native American music and performances is so much richer than what a non-Native person imagines on their best day. So what I try to do is mix and match in my scores. So yeah, I play wood flute on this next track. This is one of the cues from Lake of Betrayal, which is all about the Kinzua Dam and the Army Corps of Engineers flooding out the Seneca people to benefit other people. There were, I guess, 3 places they could have built this thing, and they chose the American Indian community to flood out instead of inconveniencing everyone else. So this is actually like an old tune, like a folk tune that I indigenized in a way. I played it on wood flute, but there on screen there was this old Quaker man who was commenting on the Kinzua Dam, and the people. So during this music, I wanted to use like an old Quaker song, but indigenize it and then put it with the orchestra. And then the second part of this music leads to a scene where they're actually burning down the buildings. They have to clear this area so they can flood it, and they're burning stuff down, and you see big things falling over and burning, and people are sitting on their cars watching their lives burn away. So it gets really dramatic at the end after this interview with this man. Then you see the burning of everything happening, and that's kind of what's going on in this particular cue.
What is beautiful about how you're explaining the stereotypes and the Charlie Hill joke, which of course I love, is really in at least academic context where I work most of the time. Phil Deloria, Dakota historian, talks about that as the sound of Indian, right? And what this piece and what this score and what your music overall does is, instead of a stereotyped sound of Indian, the dun 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 dun, into sounding Lenape, sounding Dena'ina, sounding Lakota, like we sound our many nations and ourselves. Which are also dense and complicated, that it could be indigenizing a hymn, it could be indigenizing a pop song, or things that don't even sound, kind of, as we've said elsewhere, that kind of sound quantum, like things, there might be Native people performing things that you don't assume are Native, which is what I really love about the piece that you've composed for this exhibit, just in terms of the many things that it contains in terms of not only Lenape language in the music video version, but also the many different Native musicians that you called on to put this into being, that there's so many deep and dense layers to this song, the Lenape Hoking, an anthem for the Lenape Center. I'd love to hear just a little bit more about your perspective on this piece and what it brings into being, what it generates.
Yeah. Well, the idea came for this from Adrian Coomans, another co-founder, co-director of Lenape Center. And he had the idea for music. And then we started actually working back and forth with ideas. And then it got, so we were developing the lyrics for the song in a really developed ways, pinpointing what it means to, what would it feel like to be in Lenape land, Lenape Hoking. And then it became this multivalent kind of feeling. So we came up with this sort of catchphrase, Lenape Hoking is right where I am. And that can be sung by anybody. So if you're a New Yorker wandering the streets, you could sing that song and it applies. And also for any Lenape person, Munsee person, Mohican person, if you say that song from anywhere in the whole world, it also applies. You are Lenape Hoking as well. And there are little developments in there. The rhyming scheme, the rhythmic scheme of it is very complex. It's got horns like you might hear on, bands like Chicago or Tower of Power. It's like the old brass kind of horn band kind of sound. It brings to life this feeling of being in Manhattan, which is Mannahatta. It means the place where we get the wood to make the bows, and it refers to a hickory grove of trees that is no longer there. So that's where the lyrics come from. It's not seen anymore. We're still here. There's a feeling of dancing and the stomp dances and the feelings of New York, both old and contemporary, and then into the future. Like, where are we going in the future? And not being afraid to be Lenape and be back in the homeland and be proud of who we are. And that's essentially what we're trying to get with the song. And it took a long time to develop these lyrics and then the music as well. But I wanted it to be complex enough where it's listenable, not too complex to like tax your ability to listen to it, but also so it's re-listenable. So you can listen to it again and again and again, and you're hearing something new with it all the time.
Mm-hmm. No, let's watch the video.
Piskeke on my wing, Shepenu come back home. Ne me shalang awanika, Lenape Hoking dapi.
Lenape Hokie is right where I am. 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 Lenape Hokie is right where I am.
The singability of it, I can tell you that our children hum this quite a bit, and so it is definitely a catchy song. It's beautiful, and I encourage listeners to read everything that's posted in the YouTube comments, just to see the immense efforts and kind of people it took to bring this into being. Not only your amazing composition, but just the work and the labor of all these different peoples all over the country to bring it into being is amazing. Are there any other comments or thoughts you'd like to leave folks with in terms of the role of song or sound in the exhibit, or just what the exhibit means for the Lenape Center to be able to have this space to tell a very different kind of story that has been told?
Yeah, I think I just would like to thank Joe and Adrian and Curtis, the other co-directors of the Lenape Center and the Brooklyn Public Library for housing this exhibit, hosting it, because it's the first time in the history of New York at all that there has been an exhibit curated by and exclusively about Lenape people and Lenape Hoking. It's the first time. So how many years is that? Thinking back in the entire history of New York, it's never happened. So it really is monumental, and it is the perfect exhibit. The name of it, Lenape Land, it helps place a person in the homeland, and you've got the plants and the beans and the farm hub part of the exhibit as well. And then Joe's wonderful artwork in the exhibit, the turkey feathered cape, and all the writings, plus this video, Lenape Hoking. It's just an amazing tribute, and it's long overdue. So I'm so grateful for it.
Mm-hmm. Well, thank you very much for taking time today to have a conversation, and we'll look forward to seeing the exhibit early and often. So thank you, Brent Michael Davids.
Thank you.
That was really terrific. And thank you all for staying for that interview and getting those moments to hear Brent Michael Davids' pieces. If you missed it in the introduction, I mentioned that this Sunday in the Dweck Center at Central Library, we're going to have a concert of pieces by Brent, by the Dream Unfinished Orchestra. So RSVP for that and join us this Sunday. And go to our website, bklyn.org, Lenapehoking, to see the upcoming programs that we have. That well, first of all, go see the exhibition at our Greenpoint Library. It's up until April 30th, but we have some upcoming programs on medicinal plants. We are actually growing plants on top of the roof at Greenpoint Library that were cultivated by Lenape. So it's a seed rematriation program, and those will be planted later in Prospect Park. So a lot of good stuff. And later on, we'll produce an anthology. When we started working on this exhibition and related programs, we thought, of course, we'll put books in our collection that can support the exhibition. And Brent and Adrian and Joe said, well, actually, there's no real good sources. So this is an anthology by Lenape scholars and authors. So that will become available to you for free as well. So let me see, Brent, for you, if we have a lot of people saying that they love your music in the chat. There is not a wait list for this Sunday, Vanessa, so you could go ahead and RSVP. And if the RSVP is full for Sunday, I don't think it is because it was pretty low before, but you can write to bplpresents at bklynlibrary.org, and we'll find a way to get you into those programs. While, yeah, a lot of applause for you. Well, other people may drop some questions in the chat. Brent, let me know, what other commissions or new pieces are you working on these days?
Oh, lots of things.
I'm sure.
I'm writing a lot of small things right now, band works and choral works. I've been invited this year in September to the Venice Biennale Musica. So there's a big concert of my works there, and I've invited other native composers, choral composers, to join in that performance as well. And that's in September. It's kind of hush hush, and I can't talk much about it, but I'm also starting an opera. And this is a big deal, big opera. And also, I'm working on a requiem, which is my latest this is like the project of my lifetime, probably. It's called Requiem for America, and it does two things. It sort of deals with the subject matter of the founding of America, which is actually based on genocide. You know, American Indian erasure, kill the Indians, steal the land, force them off on reservations, brainwash their children, render them invisible over the course of several hundred years. We were here thousands of years before that, like on this continent. If you think back to the ice sheets, you know, the withdrawal of the ice sheets that formed the American continent and the Great Lakes, that took place 15,000 years ago. So even, and Indians, native people have existed longer than that, you know, but we became like northeastern woodlands people from 15,000 years ago till now. So we've been living on the continent that long. So in the matter of a few hundred years, we've become erased in a way. So we're fighting for reclaiming lost languages and trying to empower ourselves to keep what we've lost, you know, to keep what we have, and to try and regain what we've lost if we can. Some of it can't be retained, and empower ourselves into the future. So that's what this whole exhibit is about for me. It's like just a chance to have a voice again, and the Requiem is doing that same thing. So what I'm doing is I'm writing requiems, a trilogy of requiems, 3 requiems, so that a particular genocide will be focused on in every single state. So every single state in the whole country was stolen land. Every single one, without exception, stolen land. And that's something that you don't hear from, you know, presidential candidates who are talking still about how America is bringing democracy to the rest of the world. And, you know, there's nothing buried in our backyard. Of course, there is. So what I'm doing is creating music that will bring forward these voices of the past. And the text, the lyrics of this Requiem is all voices of history. It's the perpetrators' voices of the people who carried out the genocides. You hear in their own words brought to life in the Requiem. And then you also hear the voices of the native people responding to the genocide. They were literate, they wrote letters, they gave speeches. We have records of firsthand accounts. So these are comparing and contrasting these different voices in the Requiem. And then the second aspect of the Requiem is that I'm hoping to get a performance in every single state in the country and District of Columbia before I die. And then it's a requirement of all of the orchestras and choruses and singers in every venue in every state that performs this work. They have to work with the local tribal communities, and that's where they get the performers to perform in the Requiem. So it's got a built-in feature of breaking down the walls and the gatekeeping that usually happens. Like how many orchestras go out of their way to reach the local Native community, which is right in their backyard. That doesn't really happen that much. So it's built into the composition that it's singing about the genocidal founding of America and bringing that message forward. And we're hearing the voices of the past. At the same time, there's a built-in mechanism where maybe some of these barriers can be broken down, and the people who are singing and performing together can start to become friends. And who knows if we can solve these issues, right? They're huge issues, but it's harder to, look in the eyes of your friends and actually genocide them or to slight them or to erase them. So that's the idea of this entire Requiem. So it's a huge project for me. And that's mostly what I'm putting a lot of energy into it.
That sounds incredible, and I can't wait to watch it as it develops. One thing that wasn't mentioned in this interview, and you reminded me of it, talking about carrying forward tradition, is your work as an educator. Can you speak about the work that you do with young composers and musicians? It's so much.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't see myself as an educator so much. I do it. I've been told that I'm good at it, but I'm mostly a writer's writer. Like I'm a composer in a way. I really focus on my own projects. But I have taught, workshops and seminars and things. I co-founded the Native American Composer Apprentice Project with the Grand Canyon Music Festival back in like 1999 or 2000. And I was the composer in residence there for a few years after that. And I've taught a lot of students, and that program is still going on right now today. It won the presidential citation for an education, given to the festival by Michelle Obama, and it's still winning awards. It's had several Native composers involved in helping the teaching of it. Including the latest one is Raven Chacon has taken it over. But then also, the first year that I taught there at the festival, I had a student for the first couple of years, Michael Begay, and he's Navajo, and he was interested in continuing his education. But he went on and got some training in music school, I think at NAU in Arizona, and then he's now at Peabody, continuing higher level compositional training.
That's
but
amazing.
He's taken over the program too. So now he's teaching we call it NACAP, Native American Composer Apprentice Project. So that's one of it. I've also carried the educational programs to other states as well under a different acronym, CANOE, Composer Apprentice National Outreach Endeavor. But it's basically the same program. And we teach Native students to compose scores, so there's a heavy emphasis, at least on my CANOE programs and at the beginning of NACAP, on learning to compose written music. And the idea is that, there's a heavy emphasis in Native arts and folk singing and powwow singing and flute playing and whatever in the oral tradition. And Native American languages and Native American music comes from an exclusively oral tradition. Primarily, there's even Native people that they're a little afraid of written languages and written music because somehow it feels like it's you're colonizing your music if you go and write it down. There's that sort of keep that written music away from me kind of attitude in the community. But I regard it differently. To me, it's another tool. Like we live in the 21st century. Even Sequoyah, when he was learning, he created a Cherokee alphabet, right? So he got the idea of these talking leaves because he was seeing all these non-Indians pass incredible amounts of information to each other. He's like, I can do that. And he invented an entire alphabet and a language for written language. But I'm the same way with music. There are things that you can do with written music that you can't do with exclusively oral music. One thing is that you can write for a large amount of people all at the same time. So if you're if you're doing exclusively oral music, then you're talking about a few people or together talking to each other, practicing again, let's do it again, let's do it again, let's do it again. You're learning by ear. With written music, you can write the whole thing down and then 80 or 100 people can play it all at the same time. You know, that's amazing. And then also you can send your music around the world. So this written manuscript now, there's a sort of basic level of understanding of written music around the entire world. So and so I want students to actually have the ability to speak that language. And then also you can develop the music in a way that you cannot do orally. Like I was explaining in the talk about taking my voice, I am Brent Michael Davids, and splitting it up into different ways. You can take like a melody and you can write it backwards and then perform it forwards and backwards. Like that's really hard to do in an oral tradition, but when you write it down, it's easy to do. And then you can layer it. Like what about backwards and forwards? What if you've got 12 different phrases all going at the same time, forwards and backwards, all at the same time? Well, you couldn't possibly do that in an oral tradition. And then this is the last thing. You can write music beyond your own ability level. So if you're a really proficient singer or guitarist or a flutist or whatever, you have a certain proficiency on your and expertise on your instrument, but there's always somebody better, right? So I can write music that's super hard to play, and I don't have to play it. There's always somebody else that can play it. So I'm writing way beyond my own ability level. If I'm writing for a full orchestra, I don't play half those instruments, but someone does. So it opens up a door. It's like having a painter, and you have the oral tradition here, but then there's all these other things that you can do with the written tradition as well, and you can just add those in. So it's not like I would counter the arguments that I'm, I'm colonizing my music because I learned written manuscripts. No, I'm just adding more possibilities into the existing ones that are there, because I can do oral music and sing power songs and everything myself, but I can also do a lot more too. And that sort of makes me, a contemporary, modern, indigenous composer.
Well, this has been a terrific program. Thank you for being here with us to answer questions. I saw some comments in the chat, people asking to get into programs at the Greenpoint Library, which are limited capacity due to some remaining BPL protocol, COVID-related protocols. I'll ask my colleagues if there's something we can do about that, and just keep checking back the events on the website, and we'll add information there if it's something that we can live stream or offer more capacity to you. But thank you all for being here. Again, it's at Greenpoint Library until April 30th. We'll have a concert with works by Brent this Sunday, April 10th. Please join us for that. And thank you so much for your time, Brent, especially with your 3 requiems on the waiting to be scored. We really appreciate you.
Yeah, thank you. And thank you to Lenape Center and Joe.
Yes,
and
thanks,
Curtis.
Lenape Center.
I feel so lucky to be a part of that ensemble. I call us the Fab Four, of Lenape Center. And we invite everyone to visit the exhibit and to think hard about, what can you do for Lenape Center and to make a contribution. And if you're living in New York City or thinking about Lenapehoking, what can you do? To acknowledge the land, acknowledge people, and help contribute to the anti-erasure of Lenape people. So anyway, thank you again.
Thank you. Thank you, Joe, Adrian, and the rest of the Fab Four at the Lenape Center. And thank you to the Rubin Foundation, who helped us make the exhibition possible. Good night, everyone. Thank you for joining us. Bye-bye.